Helluva Boss is undoubtedly one of the most important and well-loved indie shows in recent years. Coming out of seemingly nowhere after the success of the Hazbin Hotel pilot, it cultivated an entire fanbase, introduced a lot of people to the indie animation genre, and laid the foundation for a lot of important traits that would be adopted by future shows. Season 1 is widely regarded as superb, featuring a great blend of interesting characters, a deep, engaging world, and stellar animation. It was truly a wonderful experience to pick up the show during the pilot and follow the story along to the epic conclusion during episode 7. Season 2, on the other hand, has had a completely different reception. From episode 1 right until episode 12, the fan reception has been mixed. Videos criticising the show went from a rarity to an everyday occurrence. People have broadly said there's just something different about it that separates it from season 1. So in this video I'm going to analyse why this is the case and find out what happened. I'll go through and discuss what made season 1 so good, what changed with season 2, and discuss some other external things after. Like always, I'll give my personal opinion throughout and at the very end. I hope you enjoy. Let's start where it all began with the pilot. The pilot was our introduction to the series, and broadly where a lot of fans started watching. Years later it was labelled as non-canon, however it's still pretty important as it sets the foundation of what a general episode should contain. We learn about IMP and the protagonists, being the boss Blitz, Moxie and Millie who are in a relationship, and Blitz's adopted hellhound daughter Luna who works at the reception. We also learn about Stolitz and Ars Goetia who Blitz slept with to get the grimoire, allowing him to start the business in the first place. So here's the main takeaways of what fans should expect going into each episode of the series. Obviously we have the cast of characters being the 4 imp assassins and Stolitz. Blitz runs an assassination business. Their job is to go to the human world to murder people while getting paid by the clients. Lots of blood, violence, jokes and swearing, and usually 1 to 2 songs per episode. A year later we got the first episode of the series, being Murder Family. It's more or less a beat for beat retread of what happens in the pilot. Blitz and the gang are tasked to kill a woman whom cheated with their client's husband. We even get Stolitz throwing down the phone again for a second time. So again, Murder Family just sort of reiterated the show's format. The gang goes on an assassination mission, we get a wacky song, and Stolitz interacting with Blitz. Next is episode 2, Lululand. Stolitz takes Octavia to Lululand to have some father-daughter bonding. Blitz and the gang are hired to come along. We learn a bit about Blitz's backstory, Stolitz's daughter, wife and family dynamic, and some fun scenes between Moxie and Millie. So is this a mission episode? Well, it's down to interpretation, and personally I wouldn't say so. As we established earlier, a mission episode is when the entire plot is about IMP going to kill someone with a client. That's the whole point of Blitz's business. Although Stolitz technically hires Blitz and we have that battle with RoboFizz, the grimoire is never used, they don't go to the human world, and there's no dedicated target to kill. Regardless of this, Lululand was received extremely well, and to many was one of the best episodes of the series. Episode 3, Spring Broken, has the gang go to the human world to take on Blitz's ex, Veronica, and her crew. Luna finally comes with them and we learn about human disguises. We also get introduced to Tex, another hellhound that Luna has an interest in. Another great episode. Episode 4 goes back to that mission format. They need to kill their latest target, but things don't go as planned and they have to battle with the heavenly cherubs who want to save their target. This episode wasn't received too poorly at the time. However, after several months or years, the fan reception to Cherub shifted. To a lot of people, it's regarded as a bad episode, or perhaps one of the worst in the entire show. Episode 5, Harvest Moon Festival, has Stolitz invite Blitz and IMP to attend the aforementioned festival. We get introduced to a new villain called Striker and meet Millie's family. Episode 6, Truth Seekers, is broadly labelled as the best episode of the entire season. It is the highest IMDb rating of them all. Blitz and Moxie get captured by a human organisation called the Dorks and are saved by Moxie, Luna and Stolitz. Episode 7, Aussies, is part 1 of a 2-part finale. Blitz follows Moxie and Millie to Aussies on their first wedding anniversary. Stolitz comes with and we get some great songs. We see Veronica again and are introduced to Ozzy and Fizzarelli. Aussies is regarded as a really great episode by the fans, but it was at this point that some fans started to leave the series. I can personally remember seeing videos and posts from people leaving because they knew the story was going in a direction they weren't a fan of. They could see the writing on the wall, so they left early. Episode 8, Queen Bee, and part 2 of the finale was delayed by nearly 2 years, releasing in 2023. Blitz and Luna attend one of Beelzebub's parties. We meet Tex again and are introduced to his girlfriend Beelzebub. This episode is interesting because on one hand it's looked back to fondly by a lot of fans. However, it also got a lot of criticism. most of this stemming from the fact that 7 and 8 were a two-part finale. However, after 8 was delayed, VivziePop went back on her word on Twitter, saying that episode 7 was the real story finale of the season, and in some tweets explained that episode 8 was created as a bonus episode anyway. According to Vivzie, episode 8 was very much a spectacle with a simple story as a direct follow-up to another episode, so this let down a lot of people. They were expecting a continuation of what happened at Ozzy's, but basically got a fun filler episode with some music. With the benefit of hindsight, they obviously should have said that from the start. If the episode was designed as a fun spectacle, that's great, but they probably should have said that at the beginning. I can understand why fans were let down, especially since they waited nearly 2 years for the episode. So let's recap what's happened in Season 1. We've gotten 8 episodes, 2 of which are by the book mission episodes, being Murder Family and Shrub. The other 6 were all broadly regarded as very good. They were intuitively designed and introduced new characters, villains and story beats. From Truth Seekers onwards is when the Stolitz plot really started to take form. I think this is where people started to catch on to Stolitz being a central focus going forward. Starting with July of 2022, we got the start of Season 2, kicking things off with the circus. The circus basically set the tone for the rest of the series, and was broadly where fans started to be split into different camps. One side liked where the story was heading, while the other half didn't. The circus shows us the meeting between Stolitz and Blitz as kids, the introduction of Blitz's circus, Paimon, Cash Buxo, and that end scene, which is a retelling of the pilot. Like I said, the circus is where people really started to pick things apart. A couple of the main criticisms being that Stolitz and Blitz's meeting as children felt like a retcon, that Stella being a villain was a retcon, and since Queen Bee hadn't released yet, this was the first time that the rest of IMP wasn't present in an episode, so it felt like quite a divergence from the format. Episode 2, Seeing Stars, didn't fare any better, being another episode that got a lot of flack. Octavia steals her father's grimoire from IMP to go see the stars. We get the rest of IMP back in focus again and they go to the human world, but there's no target to kill. Seeing Stars is meant to be a sort of follow-on from episode 2 of season 1, Lululand. Unlike Lululand, Seeing Stars missed the mark, and in my opinion it's one of the weakest episodes of the entire show so far. The pacing felt off, the A and B plot were unfocused and would randomly swap between the two. The animation felt quite rushed and wasn't consistent. The way some characters acted felt a bit out of character. There was also the usual criticisms following on from the circus that Stolitz was really taking root in the show's core plot. Episode 3, X's and O's, just inherits the same issues as Seeing Stars. The overall focus felt confused. There wasn't a proper balance of comedy or emotion. As a result, when you're supposed to be sad, for example after we learn what happened to Moxie's mother, it's interrupted by the next scene with Krim and the sex jokes. It wasn't balanced particularly well, and the pacing just weighed down the entire episode as a result. Like I said in my review video for the entire season, it had some of the elements of a great episode, but the mismanaged tone ruined it for a lot of people. Episode 4, once again, was another episode that felt like a bit of a mixed bag. Some people liked it and a lot disliked it. Striker's new voice was liked by some, hated by others. He was a character a lot of fans were waiting for, and when he showed up, it was pretty commonplace to say that something was different about him. The pacing issues from the previous 2 episodes were back with a vengeance, taking you out of the action and forcing us to watch a seemingly pointless hospital visit. I think X's and O's is definitely worse than Western Energy, but episode 4 wasn't what a lot of fans were waiting for. As you can see, season 2 was off to a bad start. Episode 5 completely redeems the series and is the best episode to date. Just kidding, Unhappy Campers is broadly referred to as the worst episode in the entire series. It basically contains all of the issues from the previous few episodes but dialed up to 11. The pacing is just completely out of line. It's not focused and can't decide if we should follow Barbie and Blitz or Moxie and Millie. Moxie felt really out of character, with a lot of people saying that his character was ruined. Millie didn't get the development fans were after. Barbie's meeting was rushed and probably should have took up the entire episode. The songs were completely forgettable, and I don't think I've seen anyone discuss or replay the songs since the episode aired. The entire thing just felt rather inconsequential. Fans were waiting a while for a mission episode, and when they got it they ended up regretting asking for one in the first place. Episode 6 is where things take a turn for the better. It's broadly regarded as a great episode. We get the confirmation that Fizz and Ozzy are a couple, we get some awesome flashback sequences, and also the return of Striker and Crimson. It's a well-written episode with a good mix of jokes, solid writing, and decent character building. Episode 7 is again another great episode, building on that friendship between Blitz and Fizz. Mammon is filled with character and is a lot of fun on screen. He's easily one of the best sins out of the roster. The scenes with Fizz and Blitz are particularly memorable, all of the songs are catchy, mixed well, and fit with the story. Episode 8, Full Moon, brings us back to that Stolitz plotline with Blitz getting his Osmodian crystal. It's another mixed one. If you're a fan of the Stolitz plot, you'll like it, otherwise you'll probably find it as mediocre. It was cool to see the shrubs and dorks return, but some people said perhaps the episode should have been solely focused on that, or only in Stolitz and Blitz. Episode 9 and the next few episodes, like Full Moon, apart from one exception, are following that Stolitz plotline. Here, Blitz apologises to various characters, Verosika returns, and Blitz lets Stolitz move on. Once again, this episode hinges on if you like the drama and romance. I do, so I liked it, but a lot of fans didn't, so you'd find this episode as more of the same. 10 is a change of pace away from the status quo, being a mission episode with Millie and Blitz. It's pretty good. The flashback scenes were great, the villain is compelling, and the B-plot with Moxie and Luna was quite funny. But the ghost episode isn't going to knock your socks off. Similarly to some of the other episodes in this list, the discussion tapered off quite fast after this one, particularly because of the heavy focus on the Stolitz plot, so people were waiting in anticipation for that instead. The last 2 episodes of Season 2 were pretty interesting. So, going off ratings on IMDb or what fans think on Reddit, they're rated as 2 of the best episodes in the entire show. If we go off what people on Twitter or YouTube say, then they're 2 of the worst. Mastermind follows on from Full Moon and shifts up the cast dynamic, with Stolitz sacrificing everything for Blitz in a court battle. I liked the song, and the end scene was particularly impactful. For a lot of people, it felt like the Stolitz plot was moving quite slowly with very little change, but in Mastermind it actually changed things up, and that Stolitz is no longer royalty. Lastly, we have episode 12, Sinsmas. It's down to personal preference, really. Anyone interested in the Stolitz plot adored it. People who didn't care for that weren't a fan. Like Mastermind, it comes with some serious changes to the story, like Octavia leaving her father and Stolitz being confirmed. It also had the big reveal of Millie being pregnant. The reception was split down the middle. Many people were hyped for the reveals and are excited for the feature, while some say that Millie being pregnant is rather pointless and that Stolitz being confirmed was going to happen anyway, considering how big of a focus it was throughout the season. So that's Season 2 covered. Since I've shown you what made Season 1 so great and discussed Season 2, it's time to take a closer look and find out what exactly changed between the 2 seasons. The first and most noticeable thing is the change in writing. As I explained earlier, a lot of the Season 1 episodes felt quite cohesive. When you tuned into each one, you knew what you were expecting, but with Season 2, it felt like something changed. From memory, and based on old posts, I feel like a lot of fans caught onto this after the release of Unhappy Campers. That was the point where something clicked in people's heads that basically said, yeah, something's different. So most people know this by now, but the show got a new writer being Adam Nealon. Adam ended up writing episodes 2, 3, 5 and 8. He's also listed in the credits for the rest of the season. 2, 3 and 5 were pretty poorly received, as I discussed earlier. 8 was pretty good overall, but it didn't get a chance to shine since it was mostly dedicated to setting up the Stolitz plot. It's pretty clear that at least for the first half of the season, they tried a different writing style and ended up not resonating too well with viewers. The characterization felt a bit off, some of the moments were, to put it lightly, cliched, and it just didn't have as much charm as the first season. It's interesting because the show's writing wasn't really discussed too often while Season 1 aired. However, nowadays it's all anyone talks about. I think it's a really tricky situation. With any show, it's basically a massive gamble if the writers change. Sometimes it's for the best, sometimes it's worse, and in other times it takes a while for the writer to get used to the material and they end up being a great fit. I think Helluva Boss falls into the latter example. The first couple episodes of Season 2 were quite rough, but from 6 onwards things improved a ton. Adam also helped write Season 1 of Hazbin Hotel, which was really well written, but had a similar issue being the tight pacing since it was squeezed down into only 8 episodes. I remember when the Hazbin Hotel pilot came out and a lot of people slammed it for its writing and saying it was just poorly written overall. However, once Season 1 of Hazbin came out and had a new set of writers, people took the opposite opinion and said the pilot's writing was better. It's just a lose-lose situation. You can't create a story that will appease everyone. Obviously, it's fair for people to give valid critique on the writing, but there's clearly a divide between what critics want and what the fans want. Helluva Boss is a set-in-stone 4-season story, so we'll just see how things pan out as the story approaches its conclusion. This leads us on to the next big change. Linked in with the writing, Season 2 was where the Stolitz plot came into full focus. Stolitz was always present throughout Season 1, but right from the first episode of Season 2, it takes centre stage. There's a lot of things to talk about here. So firstly, your opinion will vary based on what you went into the show wanting. For a lot of old head viewers like myself, we tuned into the pilot and the first episodes because we were waiting for more Hazbin. It was a spin-off with a different cast, and as time went on, we ended up falling in love with these characters just as much as we did with the Hazbin cast after the pilot. On the other hand, you have the people who came for the original vision, the mission episodes. They wanted to see IMP go on missions in the human world and kill people. And lastly, you have the people interested in romance, drama, and all of those relevant plot lines. This is largely composed of shippers, especially people who are into Stolitz. So this is where things get a bit confusing. I think throughout Season 1, the episodes catered to all 3 of these groups. However, in Season 2, it would only cater to 1 or 2. People who wanted missions largely didn't care about the melodrama. Vice versa, the people who came for the romance probably didn't care very much about IMP doing their jobs. So this created a divide where regardless of the episode, some people weren't happy. With Season 2, 6 out of the 12 episodes are Stolitz focused, that's half the series. I can see why people not interested in the drama would leave since it took such a heavy focus this time around. This was mentioned in a video 6 months ago by another YouTuber in the fandom called Iox, but based on various interviews and cast panels, it's clear that the original vision of Helluva Boss was quite different. In the original pitch, Stolitz is nowhere to be seen. There's one line that could refer to Stolitz, as it says that Blitz has a secret obsession to take out one target who survived during his prime and ruined his 100% success record. However, it's not explicitly clear. During the lead up to the Helluva Boss pilot, again, Stolitz is nowhere to be seen. He wasn't shown in any promotional material, it was just the 3 imps and a hellhound. Vivzy has said a couple times that Stolitz was originally a villain, before Brandon proposed the idea of making him a love interest. Viv loved the idea, so the story was altered. In a series of tweets, Viv said that when she first started taking notes for the series, the 3 episodes she did work on first were Lululand, Harvest Moon Festival and Truth Seekers. Coincidentally, these 3 are some of the best in the entire series, Truth Seekers being tied for the best episode of all time on IMDb. On one hand, I like Stolitz, and it's led to some of the show's highs, but on the other side, a part of me wonders what the story would have been like if Stolitz was kept as a villain and the romance was kept out of it. Maybe we'll find out more info about this in the future, but I'm not sure. I can see why fans came into the series expecting a light-hearted episodic comedy, and then being a bit confused when it focused more on romance. I touched on this briefly during the previous point, but one of the most common criticisms is that the show lost its mission focus. As outlined during the pilot, fans went into the series expecting missions to be the norm. As Season 1 continued, there were a couple mission episodes. However, the non-mission ones were actually the fan favourites, surprisingly. In Season 2, we got a few mission episodes. However, this waned in comparison to the number of stories centred around Stolitz or other characters. This is where the crux of that criticism comes from. In order to remedy this, there were 4 Helluva Boss shorts released, with 3 of them being focused on missions. Broadly, these were reviewed as alright. They weren't necessarily bad, however they were ranked in the mid-7s on sites like IMDb, meaning they're at the lower end of the spectrum. The way I look at it, I think the show drifted from the mission format almost immediately. Right from the get-go, we were introduced to things like Stolitz's family and Blitz's ex Rosika. However, these episodes were so good that fans didn't notice or didn't care that they weren't missions. The whimsical, episodic mission of the week format that some people expected or hoped didn't materialise, and we instead got a focus on character development and world building. In Season 2, the mission-centred episodes like Unhappy Campers were some of the worst of the season. The rest focused on romance or specific things. As a result, fans started to catch on to the shift in focus, and the change in direction became more apparent. Overall, it's not an easy issue to fix. Like I said, the mission episodes tend to be reviewed the worst, but you can also explain that as just bad writing, or the fact that hardcore fans hate missions. Perhaps in future seasons the format could be expanded on a bit, like with IMP hunting down more prestigious targets such as sinners or royalty. Going into the human world to hunt someone down will inevitably get stale as a concept, so the show's writers will have to build on the original concept more to keep it fresh anyway. I think from day one there was confusion about the role of Blitz. The show is called Helluva Boss and is mainly his story, but I think fans got blindsided by how much development he got. His backstory, his romance, and everything in between took up a huge portion of the show's runtime. If you think this is a good thing, or that it should have instead focused on IMP as a whole, is down to personal opinion. I like Blitz as a character and love his story, so the show being about him isn't an issue to me, but that's not the same for every fan, so it's understandable that people fell out of love with the show when it hammered home that Blitz was the main focus. Throughout Season 1, I feel like the stakes were pretty consistent. The cast was constantly getting into battles and being put in danger. It felt like the villains they were fighting had some real threat. Striker is a good example. He was a charismatic assassin with access to angelic weaponry. During Harvest Moon Festival, you could really feel like this guy could one-shot any demon he wanted. However, throughout Season 2, all of this tension and threat is lost. During Western Energy, when he has the overpowered angelic whip around Stolitz, we the viewers are never on the edge of our seat worrying that something could happen to Stolitz. He gets injured and is put in hospital, but that's it really. There's no genuine worry or concern there. It's the same with Crimson. Crimson could have been a really compelling and threatening villain, but he just sort of comes across as a joke, and we the viewers are never worried at any moment that he could cause actual harm. He threatens the sin of lust and steals his partner, but suffers no repercussions. This continues into the end of the season. Seeing Stolitz lose his powers or the big battle against Andre, again the stakes just aren't there. For comparison, if we look at Hazbin Season 1, it has almost the opposite issue of the stakes being quite high. We see how powerful the villains are. Adam literally vaporizes Sir Pentious and sends him to heaven in an instant. We don't get anything like that in Helluva Boss. It would be interesting in future seasons if they toned things back a bit. Helluva Boss isn't like Hazbin Hotel. One of the main appeals is that we see the life of lower level demons with little to no powers. There's no Alistair that can summon an entire army to do his bidding. It's just a couple imps and a hellhound. I think the grounded aspects also kept people engaged during Season 1, but that kind of faded away as Season 2 continued. One thing that seems pretty consistent between Season 1 and 2 is that there's plenty of odd design or narrative decisions that just don't really make much sense looking back. There's examples of things that the audience picked up on when the episode's released, and the consensus was like, okay, this is a bit out of pocket and pointless, but maybe later we'll find out why it happened. We never did end up finding out why. One example being the role of Luna. Luna had a pretty consistent character development throughout Season 1 and especially towards the end of Season 2. However, during the first portion of Season 2, her character is just relegated to a background role for seemingly no reason. Luna didn't speak for nearly a year and a half during episodes, and from memory, the explanation on Twitter was that it was to save money. This feels like a bit of a cop-out excuse for the writers not knowing what to do with her character. Luna's development could have been more gradual and shown from her perspective as it was happening, instead of what happened where she got some development, then it was put on hold, then randomly continued after. Very odd. This is mentioned quite frequently, but for a lot of people the humour just wasn't as polished as it was in Season 1. A lot of the jokes didn't land or weren't particularly memorable, compared to Season 1 where the show was packed full of laugh-out-loud moments. Of course, the story was focused on the drama, and with that there's less opportunity for humour. However, it's a pretty common opinion that the jokes just weren't as good during Season 2. The first season had plenty of sex jokes and raunchy humour. However, with Season 2 they relied too heavily on these, almost like a crutch. This is probably why the "if it was written by VivziePop" meme gained so much traction. In Season 1 the comedy was pretty stellar, but in Season 2 it relied too heavily on these jokes, leading to heightened criticism and mocking. You can also just go into more general things as well, like Stolitz, Blitz and Moxie all having daddy issues. This is a trait that was present in both Hazbin Hotel and Zoophobia. If one or two characters share a similar backstory, that's fine, but it quickly gets overused. This is something I've seen brought up more frequently as Season 2 aired, and with Season 2 having concluded, I think we can talk about it finally. There's been a growing consensus that the show is bleeding viewers. There's been a lot of confusion around this and people just sort of misremembering how things were years ago. So for a while people have been saying that the show is losing fans and the episodes are getting less and less views overall. People tend to have the memory of episodes getting 30 million views within the first month of release, whereas now they only get about 10 million. One Reddit user, Fred Mercury, 2 months ago sat down and did the number crunching. I'll have it on screen and linked in the description as well. If we take a look, Season 1 episodes on average got between 7 and 10 million views in the first week. After the first month, they normally sat between 11 million and 13 million. Season 2 operates quite similarly. In the debut week, they got between 7 and 10 million again. In the first month, it increases to about 11 to 13. So, as you can see, the idea that episodes would get 30 plus million views in the first month is just false. That's just people's memory playing tricks on them and overinflating the numbers. There are a couple of exceptions, however. If the episode is especially bad, it usually gets less views overall, the best example being Unhappy Campers. Shorts also tend to get about half of the views of a typical episode. This is broadly because the shorts are seen as optional content, so you don't really have to watch them. They're shorter, so they'll be less appealing for people to watch, and they're also typically missions or filler, so of course less people will tune in compared to the traditional episodes. We can also extend the dates a bit and look at how the episodes perform after a year or more. They again perform quite similarly to Season 1. The better episodes get more views over a longer period of time, and the mediocre or poorly received episodes will get less. It's a little too early to broadly state whether or not there's a decline on a long-term basis, since we don't have the year 1 or 2 data for all of Season 2's episodes yet. Maybe that's something that can be examined a bit into the future. So what can we gather from the data? Well, firstly, the show is extremely consistent, far more than people give it credit for. So is the show bleeding viewers? Well, not really. As you can see, the show is still very popular and gets similar, if not better, initial views than it did during its first season. Though I feel like into the future, on a long-term basis, less people will be likely to tune in and re-watch the earlier episodes of Season 2, likely because these episodes are generally the weaker ones so far. I've been making content on the shows for over 5 years at this point, right from when the pilot came out. In my experience, I think the fandom or the shows in general have lost a little steam. A lot of creators who used to make content on the shows have quit or moved to different genres. This is inevitable with any niche on YouTube, YouTube, but I think the shows definitely have a different atmosphere now. The shows just also don't have the same pull in the YouTube algorithm either. If you're an older fan who's been watching the show from the get-go, you'll remember seeing a ton of clips and funny moments being shared right when the episodes would come out, and these would literally get millions of views. This doesn't happen at all anymore. The songs also tend to get less views than they used to. So as you can see, I've sort of outlined the entire story. I've showcased what made the show so special during Season 1 and what happened during Season 2 that sort of changed people's opinions. I think the way people look at Season 1 is a bit nostalgic. It was a different era when it released, especially during COVID. It was brand new, and the concept of an indie adult animated comedy releasing on YouTube with such high quality animation was practically unheard of. People were far more immersed in the story, the lore, and the characters. I think people were less critical of the series in general. It was less about what should have happened and more about what could happen next. Season 2, at least the very start, is what broke people out of this mindset. It essentially became what a lot of critics said it was during Season 1, an oddly paced romance show with too much swearing. Broadly though, like I said in my original video reviewing Season 2, I think the later episodes of Season 2 really redeemed it in my opinion. Episodes like Mammons, Oops, Mastermind and Sinsmas are among my favourites of the entire show so far. However, unfortunately, it's those first couple episodes that brought the entire thing down in a lot of ways and reduced my overall opinion of the season as a whole. I still absolutely love Helluva. I just think that when Season 3 is rolling around, hopefully some of the issues that held Season 2 back can be addressed. If they can take what worked in Season 1 and 2 and combine them together, Season 3 could be the best season of the show yet. So what do you think? Do you agree that the show changed a lot between Season 1 and 2? Or is there any criticisms I missed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching.